My house sold, and I am currently moving during a pandemic. Wow, I can't even believe it. I can't believe I'm selling my very first house that I've ever had here in Salmon Arm. It sold in a day when it was on the market. And right now I'm just kind of packing everything. As you can see, I don't really have a good setup. I just kind of have to sit with the couch. I don't have anything behind me to put in the background. Since I'm a little bit busy right now with packing and just getting ready to move, I thought that for this week's video, I wanted to talk about the stories behind the images. Like what really goes on behind these landscape photographs. It's very hard to look at landscape photography and kind of paint like a story in your head of what went on versus looking at wedding images. You know exactly what went on. Shows an entire story the wedding day, and I always find it fascinating to hear like things from landscape photographers about their trips or the hard times during landscape photography. Those are always the best stories, are the ones that are the hard times, because there's a lot of growth with those. So I have 3 stories that I want to share with you. The end one is actually not really a finished story, so you'll have to subscribe and stay tuned for another video about that story, because it's just not finished yet. The first one that I want to tell is the most recent trip that I took. I went to my parents' house in Saskatchewan. I live in BC, so this is a pretty big drive. And along the way, I stopped at Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta. You guys have probably already seen that other video from when I was shooting landscapes there. And then I decided after I was finished visiting my parents that I was gonna stop back on the way home and do another video, but this time just of self-portraits. So I booked a campsite, I had a big plan, stay overnight there, head out and photograph either a sunrise or a sunset. It wasn't decided yet. So the day that I left Saskatchewan to come home and then I stopped, it's called Brooks, this city that I stayed in. So when I got there and I got to the campsite, I had some hours to just chill and hang out until sunset. I hung around and then I got ready to head out and leave, and I went to go start the truck that I was driving and it would not turn on. I don't know anything about vehicles, so I'm going to fast forward this part, but the caretaker ended up coming over. The caretaker of the campground ended up coming over and helping jump the battery, so we got it up and going. And then basically the plan was that just drive it to the dinosaur park, because it's about a 40-minute drive and I'll be driving at highway speeds and that should charge the battery. So no big deal, just had to get a little bit of a boost. When I arrived at Dinosaur Park, I was sitting in the parking lot for maybe a minute and then the vehicle just shut off on its own. And that is when I knew I was kind of in trouble. I was way out of the city. Clearly something was wrong that was not fixed by boosting it, and panic started to set in. The only thing that I can really do is just call like a service vehicle to come out and help, and because I just know nothing. I don't know how to fix this situation. Called someone and explained on the phone what was going on, and they had said, well, we'll be out there in about 2 hours. So I had this 2 hours now to myself where it was like, okay, what should I do in this time? I wasn't really feeling good because of the vehicle. It was kind of annoying. But I still really wanted to shoot something. So I had enough time to kind of walk down to a location that I knew exactly where it was, so I knew exactly what I was going to shoot. I made it there, got changed, I did a few stories for Instagram, and then shot this self-portrait, and this is pretty much the only image that I took from this evening. I have some other versions of this self-portrait where I'm standing, but I just haven't edited them yet. But basically this is it. This is all I could get because of the kerfuffle with the vehicle. When I got back up to the vehicle to see what was kind of going on, the service truck came about 20 minutes after that, and again said a bunch of stuff that I don't understand, but boosted it and said get to a shop because you're gonna have to have this looked at in the morning. Everything's closed right now. It's like 9 o'clock at night. So luckily the vehicle was able to drive again at those highway speeds, had about another 40-minute drive, and I knew that as entering the city, I knew upon entering the city that I was going to hit a lot of lights. So this is where more panic started to set in. And it was, oh my gosh, if I hit a light and I stop, this thing's just going to die on the street. Which did happen, by the way. So when that happened, I was about 1 kilometer from the closest Canadian Tire. It was very frustrating. But a police officer drove by just as this happened. And he basically spun around and came up behind me, put his lights on to make sure everything was safe, and just basically hung out until another service person could come and boost this thing so we could get it to Canadian Tire. That service person was taking a very long time. The police officer just said, you know what? there's these boys here in this parking lot right now. They're hanging out. They all have their trucks. Let's get them to boost this. So I'm going to say they're teenagers. So these teenage boys brought their truck around. They all had jumper cables. This battery was so dead, by the way, that it took 2 jumper cables at the same time to just give it enough power to be able to drive it again. So that worked, and it was able to go and able to run. But the problem was that I still had to face some stop signs and lights. So what ended up happening was the police officer had to escort me with his lights on. He gave me like directions of where to go, and he basically said, just yield at these stop signs. I'm going to follow behind you. It's really late at night. There's no traffic. And then immediately go to Canadian Tire and do not leave that parking lot. So I had to sleep in Canadian Tire for the night because I had to wait until it opens and figure out what the heck was going on with the vehicle. Fast forward to the morning time, it was just a completely dead battery, which, by the way, this situation would have been preventable had that been fixed before I left. So it was one of those very frustrating photo trips where nothing went as planned because of things not really related to photography. I'm very happy I at least got one image, but it only just kind of makes me want to go back out there and finish what I was doing. And this is an 8-hour drive from where I live, but I would do that. I will go back out there. My second story is slightly different. It was, I'd say, something very unexpected. And this is probably about, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years ago. So my friends who know me will know that I'm not a drinker. And if I have one drink, I can get fairly tipsy, and we're just not a good combination. For some reason, one night in the fall time, I decided to drink a little bit too much. And that led to a hangover in the morning. I still have so many questions for myself about this, like, why at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, hungover, did you decide to go up on top of a mountain for landscape photography during sunrise? It just seemed like the worst time to go and do something like this. But no, of course, I went and did it. I didn't drive, someone else drove, but I came along, and I was like, my plan was to do a time lapse and get some landscape images. The conditions at the time was very low fog, so I knew that there was probably a cloud inversion at the top of this mountain, which there was, and it was probably some of the most amazing shooting conditions I've ever had. But I was hungover, and I felt ill, and it was not good. Like, I think I probably was still a little bit drunk. I have a lot of questions for myself. So as I was at the top, I started doing the time lapse, and like, this is a pretty sheer drop. So if you fall, like, that's it, you're toast. And I just remember getting the time lapse ready, and I was also doing like a cell phone video, and I looked down and I was just like, I do not feel good. Oh boy, I cannot stand at the edge. So basically what I did was I ran my time lapse for 30 minutes, and I just kind of went and sat by a tree, huddled up, put my hood over my head, and kind of napped while I just heard the camera click. I did have a second camera with me, and I ended up shooting some landscape images as well. And these are probably some of my favorite images. Definitely my favorite time lapse I've ever done. So I'm like, why? But why hungover? So my lesson from that story is just do crazy things and go out and shoot whenever you feel like. Don't hold it back. If you have the urge to shoot, just go out and do it, hungover or not. New Zealand in January 2020. This story is my favorite trip that I have ever taken in my entire life. I cannot stress how amazing New Zealand was. In October of last year, a friend and I decided we wanted to go on a trip to New Zealand in January. So it was about 3 months out when we booked and planned this entire trip. We decided to go for 2 weeks and just go around the South Island of the country and photograph as many spots as we could. It was a photography trip. That's all we did every day. And the only day that I really actually want to talk about of this trip is one day when we went to Milford Sound. And both my friend and I, we still bring this up. We still talk about how amazing this day. Actually missed sunrise on this morning. We slept in, had a really good breakfast, and then just decided, let's just go head out and drive to Milford Sound from Tianu, which if I remember correctly, the drive to Milford is about an hour and a half. So we knew that we would see some things along the way, and we were like, let's just wing it. Let's just go out and photograph no matter the light, no matter the weather conditions, which we did. The first stop, and probably what really set the pace for this day and made it so amazing, was when we found a bunch of lupins, and we could see them in the distance, but we didn't actually know how to access them. We ended up figuring it out and spent some time in these lupins, and there's daisies as well, in just such a beautiful area. The light was crap, and I don't think either of us really got what I would say portfolio images, but they are some of my favorite images that I took from that trip, because it was just all about creating stuff and creating things together as a team and bouncing ideas off of each other. It was a really, really, really good morning. So after we shot the lupins, we carried on and continued on down the highway to get to Milford. And we would just pretty much stop whenever we saw something. We're like, that would be a good scene. That would be a good scene. And we did that the whole way up there. Finally, when we got to Milford, we were so hungry, so we had our lunch there. We ordered a bunch of food. We ate at like the cafe. I just remember I was starving. I was so hungry. Just shoveled it all in, and then we were headed out to the Milford Sound area to continue shooting, and this is where I got my favorite image from the entire trip, which is a self-portrait of me in the yellow dress amongst all the green rocks. So apparently we had very ideal weather at Milford when we were there. I guess it's not always like that. We just had this good mix of sun and cloud. So there was mood from the cloud, and the light was not harsh. There was no rain and there was no full sun. Could not have asked for perfect midday conditions. After we finished photographing there, we headed back to Tianu. We stopped along the way though again. We found some very cool scenes, and we just kept shooting pretty much. I think it started raining, so we pretty much shot until it started raining and then headed back to where we were staying. And I remember when we got back to the place that we were at, we just kept talking about that was like the best day. That was the best photo day. And it truly was. There's just no expectations. It just reminded you how much you love being a photographer. And I can confirm after that trip and after that day that even if this wasn't my career and there was no money involved, I'd still be doing it. And that day, when we did get home and then we had supper and stuff, I just remember this feeling, how I felt. It's very hard to describe, but I kind of felt like a kid that had just been out all day playing outside, just playing so hard, coming back in for dinner, so exhausted, can't keep your eyes open, and you just fall asleep at the dinner table. Just an all-around the best day. I still smile from ear to ear when I think of New Zealand and all of the amazing memories from that trip. But with that story, it actually does involve a little bit of why I'm selling my house and what's kind of going on. I just can't share the rest of those details with you yet, but I will be able to. And if you subscribe, then you'll find out the rest of this story down the road. And I would really, really appreciate it if you guys would come along this journey with me. Another thing that also came from my trip to New Zealand, which is very unexpected, was an opportunity. So when I got back and I had edited all my images, another photographer reached out to me and we started engaging in conversation. And that ended up leading to now co-leading on a photo tour in New Zealand, which was supposed to happen this year, but it's been pushed to next year. So my one random spontaneous trip to New Zealand with no expectations, just a vacation for photography, landed me a job. And I don't know, there's just something very, very cool about that it's, to me, it's like if you put yourself out there and you put yourself out to connect with other people, things will happen. Anyways, I hope that you guys enjoy creating your own stories and you have your own epic memories from trips you've taken or stories behind your landscape images. Thanks for listening, and I'm going to share a few more images with you of just stories that I have been a part of and created over the past 10 years that I've been a photographer. Talk to you guys again soon. Bye!